What's going on, golf fans? It's your boy Gsluke here with our DFS core plays for the Sony Open. We started off 2023 with a bang there at the Tournament of Champions. Had our first outright of the year hit there with Jon Rahm at plus 750. Smashed on Prize Picks, smashed on Draftkings as well. Ended up having at least 2 showdown slates with over 2.5x profit. There on Sunday, it was a 4x day for me. Absolutely smashed with that Colin Morikawa collapse. And of course, helped us over there with the Jon Rahm outright. So for as much as I like Colin, as bad as I felt for him in the moment there, it did end up helping the bankroll. So I have to be a little bit selfishly happy there for all of us out there that had those tickets. But here for the Sony Open, looking to build on that with the first full field event. We get to deal with a full 144 golfers, a cut line, a lot of strategy that is involved with getting to that cut line. Course fits, more choices to choose from, both from the betting and the outright market. Just a lot of exciting things cooking here for the next tournament. So gonna break down my top 4 plays towards the top of the pricing board here with our core picks. 4 players that I think are exceptional sources of leverage to the field, solid course fits. Perhaps they're just players coming in with form that are being slept on. In either circumstance, are players that I will be well over the field on, both for GPPs and for cash contests, and perhaps 4 players that you might want to keep an eye on for yourself. So with a lot to get into, let's go ahead and get this thing rocking. All right, first things first, let's take a look at our key stats to get an idea of the sort of key metrics I'm using to identify my top plays. And over here, this is a course that we've seen for quite some time, so we really have a good idea of what plays well at Waialae. And just to give you the Spark Notes version, it's a lot about your short irons, that 50 to 75, 75 to 100 yard range, or that mid iron range, where you're from 150 to 175, 125 to 150. Those buckets are going to be overutilized compared to your PGA Tour average, whereas your long irons, your 200 plus yard iron shots are essentially going to be non-existent. The par 3s are all right about 200 yards at maximum in terms of their length, sometimes playing even shorter with upper tee boxes. And with your par 5s, you have a 500 yard par 5. And outside of the, I'd say at 2, maybe 3 of the other par 5s, you're not looking at a 200 plus yard iron shot. So try and hunker down on those short iron ranges. It's something that I've done in my modeling. You can see 50 to 125 is weighed a lot more than it would be most weeks. And then those mid iron ranges right there weighed also significantly more than the rest of them. Looking at putting, we're looking at Bermuda. We have Bermuda from tip to toe, whether it's the rough fairways or the greens. So that's weighted into modeling. Looking at slow greens, they tend to run right around 11s to start the week, sometimes creeping up closer to 11.5 by the end. Driving accuracy is super important, and especially so this year. The rough around Waialae is said to be 3 inches this year rather than 2.25 that you've seen in the years past. Now, that might just be them rounding up. It might actually be 3 inches this time around. But either way, I want to prepare in case it's going to play a little bit more penal, because a 3-inch Bermuda grass is gnarly. You can't see the ball when it gets settling down into that. Sometimes you're just hacking out and just hoping you can get it 40, 50 yards down the fairway. When it's a 3-inch Bermuda, it's a completely different story than if it was a 3-inch bent grass. Bent grass doesn't grow in nearly as thick as a Bermuda. It's not as grainy as a Bermuda grass, and thus not nearly as penal. So keep that in mind. You could see a much larger missed fairway penalty this week at Waialae than what we have over the last really forever around this country club if it's truly a 3-inch Bermuda grass. So I'm looking at fairway percentage and also good drive percentage to try and make sure I'm taking players that aren't missing too far offline when it comes to the off the tee play. Birdie or better percentage, important at a birdie fest. Now, if the rough is a little bit more gnarly, it might not play to truly like 20, 25 under par. We might see something from 15 to 20 under par winning this year, but nonetheless, you still got to make plenty of birdies to get to that score. So looking at that, it's also extremely helpful for fantasy scoring, which is of course the format that we're playing here. Shots gained at Waialae Country Club. There's been quite a correlation between past success at Waialae and then future success as well. So we're looking at some of that experience. Shots gained approach at a Bermuda rough. So trying to look at that in case it's a little bit more gnarly. Shots gained on easy conditions. Courses under 7,100 yards, and then a bunch of comp courses. That would be the Sea Island Seaside course where they play the RSM Classic, a flat coastal course, relatively short. Harbortown fits all of those same descriptions. Sedgefield not a coastal course, but a short track. It's flat. You have to be extremely accurate off the tee. Checks a lot of the same boxes. El Camaleon for Mayakoba. A lot of the past winners there have also been past winners at this event. Those would include Brendan Todd, Matt Kuchar, who have won at both venues. And honestly, there's like 4 or 5 other names on that list as well. But we'd be here all day if we named them all. Port Royal for the Bermuda Championship, another short positional track, right around 7,000 yards, which is what you get this week at the Sony Open. And then Silverado Resort and Spa for the Fortinet Championship. Now, this is the only course on here where you don't have Bermuda grass. I guess the Mayakoba, it is past Palm. We want to mention that. But past Palm, I don't want to say it's similar to Bermuda, but it's sticky, just like a Bermuda grass is. You do have the POA bent mix over there for the Fortinet Championship. So from the agronomy perspective, there are quite a few differences, but another short positional course where driving accuracy is a whole lot more important than your driving distance. And a lot of the past players that finish in the top 5 or even potential past champions at the Fortinet Championship, you've also seen them play well at these other short positional Bermuda tracks. So all of that to say that we're looking for short, accurate players that on Bermuda can fill it up with the putter, right? We know it's going to be at least like a 15 under par winner, unless the wind gets really gnarly over the weekend. But as of right now here on a Tuesday, it doesn't look like the weather is going to be all that large in impact. We're looking at maybe 15, 18 miles an hour of winds at the very most projected right now, and 2, potentially even 3 days of sub 7, 8 mile an hour winds. So they're going to torch the course those 2-3 days, and that one day where it looks a little bit dicey probably isn't going to throw them too far off. So we're looking at solid scoring. We're looking for players that can keep it in the fairway, drive it well, and ideally score on Bermuda. So with all of that in mind, let's start with our core picks. There's 4 of them this time around. And first off, we have Sungjae Im at $10,300. I was so tempted to take Tom Kim, and looking at the stats, the ball striking, the approach play has been there over the last 4 or 5 starts, and ever since that win at the Wyndham Championship, the putter has gone ice cold. And while a lot of people, myself included, especially like 1.5, 2 years ago, would be jumping at the bit to go after a Tom Kim, I'm worried about his ownership. He might be 30, potentially 35, 40% owned. Now, it's a full field event, so 40% owned. Probably even 35% owned is a little bit far-fetched, but 30% owned in a full field event is a lot. It's getting to a point where it's almost an automatic fade. So for me, I'm a little bit hesitant there. If he ends up coming in lower owned, I may end up pivoting back onto a Tom Kim, but at least as of my early ownership projections, it's looking like Sungjae Im is a beneficiary of being projected, or should say priced, just below a Tom Kim. He's coming in way lower owned than he probably should be. And frankly, if Tom Kim wasn't in this field, you'd be looking at probably a 30, maybe 35% owned Sungjae Im. And because of the ownership, because of the fact that he's priced right below another mega chalk option, you're looking at maybe a 5 to 7% ownership decrease, if not closer to 10%. Like I said, in the situation where Tom Kim isn't in this field, I mean, Sungjae Im at $10,300 could legitimately be like 40% owned here. He's a perfect course fit. We know he loves Bermuda. Last week, the ball striking was a little bit shaky there in round 1, but for rounds 2 through 4 was excellent. The putter wasn't there for round 2. Round 3 came along a little bit, and round 4 was spotty at best. So we know he also has that same room for improvement. But what I like about Sungjae Im is that he's also long off the tee. With that gnarly rough, strength becomes a huge factor in trying to hack it out of there. And we've seen Sungjae Im have success at the Valspar Championship, have success at PGA National for the Honda Classic, where you have a similar 2.5, 3-inch Bermuda grass rough, and accuracy and distance off the tee is a huge reward. When you're out there putting it to 70, 80 yards per average, and you have the sort of wedge game of the Sungjae Im, he might be one of the few players that can keep it in play and be aggressive, which is really what I think makes him interesting here, right? He's accurate off the tee. He's one of the top 15 players in terms of driving accuracy in this field. You're looking at solid Bermuda numbers. He's gaining over a 1/3 of a stroke per round, which compared to how he's putted of late, it actually hasn't been all that great. It's actually slightly lower than his baseline over that last 36 rounds. But still not worried about it. He's had plenty of wins on Bermuda in the past, and in fact, I think almost all of his wins, maybe one of them, ended up being on like bent POA, something like that. But a majority of Sungjae's top-end performances have been on Bermuda, and of course down there in the Florida swing where he's just absolutely printed checks over the years. There's Bermuda grass on every single course. So love him. The recent stats, you know, I don't want to look into this too much because a majority of these are being pulled from well before during the fall swing, so don't look into it too much. But we know prolific driver, going to gain across the board in terms of your shots gained metrics. So you really couldn't make a course that Sungjae would be bad at, right, where he wouldn't be a solid course fit. But what I think makes him an exceptional fit this week is that lethal combination of both driving accuracy and driving distance. He's one of the few players that I'm confident can keep it in play. I mean, a Corey Connors comes to mind, but when I'm trying and pick somebody to make all of those putts to get to a 15, 20 under par, I'm much more confident that a Sungjae Im can get there, can make enough of those 15, 20 footers, maybe those, you know, sub 10 foot putts, than somebody like a Corey Connors. So Sungjae Im, sign me up, especially because he's getting a little bit overlooked due to a Tom Kim. One of my favorite plays, if not my favorite play on the entire slate. Next up, we've got Russell Henley. He had a heartbreaking loss last year to Hideki Matsuyama, had a massive lead going into Sunday, and I do think that people are going to hold that against him. Not look at the bright side where, you know, he was in contention. He was looking unstoppable at this event through the first 4 events. And when you look at his putting stats last year, they were decent, right? They were what you would expect for somebody that was dominating through the first 3 rounds. But what people don't think about is it wasn't even close to his best putting performance here ever. Back in, I believe, 2013, so a whole 9-10 years ago, he went out there, was able to gain over 12 strokes putting on these greens, which I believe was the second, maybe it's the best putting performance at this event of all time. So clearly loves these greens. You know, last year showcased that, has showcased that over the years. And of late, the only thing that Russell Henley can't do is putt, right? So getting him on these flat greens that pretty much anyone can putt on. I mean, Corey Connors was able to gain strokes on these greens last year. A few other spotty putters have had really solid performances on these greens at Waialae over the last few years. Look at this, Russell Henley, right? Gaining off the tee. Okay, he's accurate off the tee, the most accurate player in this field. Not the longest, but we're looking for guys that can keep it in play this week, keep it out of that gnarly rough, and there's no better player in the field than a Russell Henley at doing so. The approach play has been semi-elite, right? Gaining over half a stroke per round, that's great. Now he's a little bit expensive, so, you know, we'd expect that for somebody in this range, but losing, look at this, nearly 0.9 strokes per round with the flat stick, which historically for Russell Henley is not his game. If you look at his stats from even just last year, especially going back 2-3 years into the past, he's been at the very least a slight positive with the flat stick. If not, you know, the further back you go with the Russell Henley, the better putter he gets, where he was gaining close to 0.2 strokes per round with the flat stick, has gone completely in the other direction. So while the ball striking has been consistent, the flat stick has kind of gone awry. But look at this. His shots gained putting differential on Bermuda, and again, what this is a player's baseline on Bermuda compared to how they have putted over the last, in this case, 36 rounds. He's nearly a stroke better than that. And the reason why I use this as a metric to try and identify pot plays, players that I think are capable of going out there and hitting a ceiling, is there at some point, right? If you're using a baseline as their average, right, going to regress back to their mean, the larger this differential is, the more quote unquote due, right, in quotes I'll put, because it doesn't always equate that way. But in terms of the law of averages, the more quote unquote due they are to regress back to that mean. So I like taking shots on these sort of players, particularly players that are trending well with the ball striking. I mean, last week at the Century Tournament of Champions wasn't a great week for Russell Henley, but still was able to get some work in, try and get some of that rust off, unlike the rest of the field that haven't played in tournament play since at least a month from now, if not closer to like a month and a half for a majority of the players. And Russell Henley has historically popped at this golf course before. At least 2, 3, 4 times over his career has had a solid putting performance around Waialae Country Club, so why not this week as well? Next up, we've got ourselves Adam Scott, so perhaps a little bit of a dart throw here. So Russell Henley he's not going to be super low owned. He's not going to be a single digit owned player. At least I wouldn't imagine so here on a Tuesday. Some GM's going to be relatively chalky, but I don't think he's going to be mega chalk because of Tom Kim. Adam Scott should be a good pivot here. He should be probably close to like 10, maybe 12% owned. Again, it's early on a Tuesday, so that is, obviously subject to change. But $8,600, I like him at a short positional track. I've seen it at PGA National. I've seen him play at Wyndham before in person. He's more than okay with hitting 3-woods. He's excellent, very accurate off the tee with the 3-wood, or of course with his driving iron, he's able to hit that something like 255, 260 carry. And around this track, that's more than enough to play it. I went through the hole-by-hole breakdown. If you guys have seen my course breakdown video, where I show where you can hit pretty much a driving iron off of every single tee and have at most like 165, 160 yards in. For somebody like Adam Scott, whose 3-wood goes a 295, sometimes 300-yard carry, he could be looking at pitching wedge into almost every single green with an extremely accurate club for Adam Scott. So the off the tee play, I'm not worried about. He showed that at the Wyndham. He nearly won that a few years ago. If you remember, not this past year, but the year before that, yipped a putt in the playoff to not end up winning that. And he's decent on Bermuda, right? He's a slight positive in that category. Of late, has been a slight negative putter, so maybe that'll get him back to a pop week here. When Adam Scott tends to pop with a putter, it tends to be on Bermuda grass, and he's going to be super low owned. So Adam Scott, he's got the ball striking we're looking for, and if you take a look at the shots gained metrics, they're not going to wow you, right? You can see he's right around a neutral with the approach play. You don't love to see it, but he's not a huge negative there. He's gaining a bunch off the tee, a long and a straight player, which, with the 3-wood this week, and I think he might not even put the driver in his bag. Like, this is the kind of golf course where he doesn't need a driver. He's more than long enough with that 3-wood. He could gain a bunch of strokes. He could be a 0.5, 0.75 strokes gained sort of player with that 3-wood off the tee. The approach play, you gotta hope that he has that pop week. And everything else has been right around a neutral. This just sticks out to me as the shortest shots gained profile of somebody that could just pop. He's got that pop sort of profile to him. And like I said, at some of the comp courses we're looking at, and I'll remind you of a few of them down here. At Sedgefield, he's had a few pop performances. You've seen him play well at El Camaleon over the years. A few of the top courses, he's played out over the years, no wins or anything like that. So not anything that super stands out, but that Wyndham Championship, especially Sedgefield, where it's a lot of 3-woods off the tee there, is kind of what I'm hunkering down on, and especially when he's 10, 12% owned. It's Adam Scott. You're comparing him to a KH Lee, right? I mean, KH Lee, great play. I considered him for this core picks video, but he's going to be a higher owned than an Adam Scott. Taylor Montgomery maybe twice as owned as somebody like an Adam Scott, and it's not like I don't like Taylor Montgomery. I'm probably still playing him this week, but when we're comparing him to somebody like a JJ Spawn, for example, up here. I mean, a Cam Davis, I love him this week, right? Similar player to an Adam Scott, both Aussies right there. Is he twice as good as an Adam Scott? Is he twice as likely to succeed as an Adam Scott this week? Because that's what the ownership is reflecting right now. So it is a true pivot play. It always is going to bring risk when you're using a pivot in these large field GPPs. But when it pays off, you're going to be in the small majority of people that end up having him in a lineup, giving you all kinds of leverage to the field. And lastly here, we've got Keith Mitchell at $8,300. Keith Mitchell has a really good track record here. So if we go to the event history, you'll get an idea for what we're talking about. So first off, Adam Scott hasn't played here all that much, right? 1 of 2 for making cuts, but Keith Mitchell here, 4 of 5 over the last 5 years making cuts. That includes 4 top 25 finishes, 3 top 16 finishes, and a top 7 finish last year, which, obviously trending in the right direction there. Went 25th, 16th. We'll ignore the missed cut there, right? Like I said, made 4 of the last 5 cuts, but then 14th and 7th. So, kind of progressing in the right direction like we're looking for there. And with the gnarly rough, he's one of the few players that's also accurate and long off the tee. In fact, I was a little bit surprised looking at this. Over the last 36 rounds, he's number 7 in the field after the withdrawal from James Hahn in the field in driving accuracy. So he's at a 69.7% rate, a 7 point something rate there in terms of his driving accuracy over the last 36 rounds, which you love to see from a Keith Mitchell, right? He's not typically all that accurate off the tee, and perhaps that's why he's had the success here, because Kind of like a Sungjae Im, he can be aggressive, try and put himself in that wedge range, and Keith Mitchell also tends to be a really good player from that 50 to 125 yard bucket. So checking a few of those boxes, has the event history to boot. Just to give you an idea of some of the other event history on our picks here, Russell Henley, of course, elite course history, an 11th and a 2nd place finish after 3 subpar performances. Going up here to Sungjae Im, you can see it's been a kind of hit or miss. A couple top 21 finishes, just a middling made cut, and then the missed cut last year. So all of that, hopefully Tom Kim's ownership, hopefully the missed cut last year keeps people off of Sungjae Im. But I think especially these lower 2 plays, Scott and Keith Mitchell, are going to be great sources of leverage to the field in terms of ownership. Russell Henley might potentially be that same sort of pivot play. And Sungjae Im, one of my just core foundational pieces. I mean, if he's going to be 20-25% owned, then I'll play him in 50, maybe 60% of my lineups. It's that sort of play. I have bet Sungjae Im outright. I also bet Russell Henley, Adam Scott, and Keith Mitchell outright. And I just like last week, right? I ended up betting Xander Schauffele. I ended up getting that bet voided and refunded, which was great. We hit on the John Rahm outright last week. These sort of plays that have the good course fit or just sources of value on the DFS board are oftentimes that same source of value on the betting board. So it's not always going to be the case where I'm betting these core picks outright, but definitely the case for this week, and just wanted to point that out for y'all. Alright guys, that is all I've got for the DFS core picks. Before you hop on out of here, go ahead and comment down below who you've got winning this golf tournament. Also smash that like button, and also subscribe to the channel if you haven't already so you don't miss any of the content in the future. We'll have value picks dropping, our weekly DFS live stream, which will be Wednesday at 7 p.m. On there, we'll be touching on the weather, which is also important when putting together your DFS lineups to see whether there's an edge for the AM or the PM wave, an important factor in these full field events. But go over any of your live questions. We'll go through DFS strategy, cash picks, prize picks for anybody interested on that side. Just everything you need to know heading into this week to go out there and profit from the fantasy side. But like I said, guys, best of luck with all of your contests. Thank you guys for stopping by, enjoying the content, supporting me here on the channel, and I'll catch you guys for next time.